kind of looking at it from two perspectives. You have the firm, the global firm perspective, right, where you're interacting with multiple projects intimately. And then you have it from a large perspective, looking at it at an industry scale, right? So, and both of you have talked about this concept of configurators, right? So how do you, when it comes to like configurators for product design or automotive industry, there's kind of that idea of, mass production. There's an economy of scale there, right? Which in architecture, there's scale, right? Because we deal with, large projects, airports, skyscrapers, whatever. But each one of those projects, the end product is different, although the ingredients to the product will be similar, right? You have offices, you have reception areas, whatever, right? So how do you deal with developing configurators where there's the sameness and yet difference?
I mean, if I can go first on that one. So I think this is where I think these were some kind of fundamental, questions that we asked of ourselves at the beginning of the Construction Innovation Hub project. Rather than, what do we want to be designing a configurator for? Because that was the original brief we were given, right? As part of this project, we were given the headline brief of rapid prototype configurator. And for us, it's like, okay, Georgios put it quite succinctly, there is not a silver bullet configurator. And so the point we made, and I think this is where, it might have the title of configurator, but it's fundamentally an interoperability proposition that we've put forward, is how can we enable users with a data framework to essentially build their own configurators on top of that for their particular needs. So, a facade design company could just build a configurator that suits the facades that they work with, the facades that maybe they supply, as long as it connects, for instance, to the right data coming out of perhaps a structural engineer's process. So, the columns and slabs that might need to be the fixing points for that. And so, yes, I think in answer to your question, Charlie, there's a lot of different applications for configurators there, and we haven't necessarily solved any of them. We're just trying to make them talk to each other.
I mean, just to add to that, Andy, I think an important aspect, which I've sort of tried to kind of highlight in the presentation, is this aspect of the object specifications, right? So the point we're trying to make is that, yes, we've been capable for some time now to exchange data. Interoperability is a huge topic. What we're adding here to the mix is like a capability to validate and verify the data we're exchanging. Because it's one thing to pass data, the other thing is it actually useful? And I think this is where we start this process of creating what we effectively consider a full picture of what is all the checks, all the requirements that any project would need, and then how we can actually start building answers towards those requirements. I think this is one of the key aspects of the common configurator framework. And in a way, that's why even choosing a schema is not important to us. Eventually, there will always have to be, as we said, for the purposes of collaboration, a schema has to be adopted. But they're already out there, so many different schemas, right? And we know that they're emerging by the day. That's not the point. The point is that once you adopt a schema, you have to have a way so that your specs are compatible with the objects. And I think this allows for us to start exploring much more radical, let's say, concepts of what a configurator is and what we consider as standardized production. That makes sense.
No, definitely. Mathieu, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, this duality, right? Where the configurator term has not been used so much. That's the first time I've heard it in an AC presentation, I think. But you usually talk more about this, decision-making tool or this kind of terms. And as we advanced in the past few years, I mean, starting from product design, and obviously since a lot of the community in computational and parametric design are in AEC, we started seeing the rise of these like smaller scale architectural projects, and where a lot of designers were trying to solve the entire problem with one configurator, right? Like with a single one. And as we've seen more and more of these cases, and as we've encountered, all the complexities and everything that comes with it, I think we are pretty much now convinced that there's no solution of continuity, right? Which is why we're trying, with these new tools to kind of take the solution, the problem from the completely other end, right? And produce, try to have sparse, simple, portable tools that really are just like, maybe if they are very far from solving the entire problem, can still be unit functionalities that can be reused, on potentially a lot of projects, and save time, automate repetitive tasks, and save time to the project teams like this.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Having spent a couple of years myself in the tech industry, understanding kind of the procedures of kind of like that unit within the tech industry, there's so many parallels that can be drawn between tech and AEC. And it's almost as if, in architecture school, we go through like management class and all this other, and professional practice, whatever. I almost feel like there should be a class that's taught about tech management practices on top of AEC management, because there's so many parallels that could be brought in. There's a synergy there. We got a couple of questions that are coming in through the Q&A. One of them, this is geared towards the the design for manufacturing. Do you envision developing unique design output schemas for each contractor, for each trade?
Well, in essence, yes, but not necessarily through, again, not necessarily through us, developing those configurators, but more enabling that that framework upon which those configurators can be built. So, that's why the program that we're part of is key, because it involves parties from across. It's essentially a vertical cross section through the UK construction industry, right? So, right from tier ones down to glazing and facade manufacturers, via engineers and designers, etc. And a degree of, the involvement is is to have a level of digital literacy that allows those companies to essentially build configurators that suit their ideals, with this kind of ultimate vision of having a tool chain from beginning to end of the design and construction process. So, in essence, yes. But we'd like them to do it themselves.
So essentially, you'd want to supply the, for lack of a better word, the framework and platform,
yeah,
and have them build a configurator on top of it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, yeah, essentially.
And is that to stay like arm's length away from? Because in architecture, we always say that we deliver documents for design intent, but we don't want to deliver means and methods, right? Is that kind of why you want to stay that arm's length away?
I think it's the sheer magnitude of the problem. Having one party responsible for delivering configurators for every single aspect of a design and construction project is I think nobody is going to want to take that on. And so why not let the subject matter experts who have the necessary digital capabilities actually take it on themselves?
I see. So they're kind of the more knowledgeable, as you said, they're like the knowledge experts. Let them kind of deal with what the output data they want, essentially, and kind of how they want to manipulate it. And it kind of helps remove that black box concept, right?
Just to add to that, I think there's great value. There's a lot to be learned by us architects, if you want, from this sort of multi-directional, the downstream versus upstream flow of information. There is a lot to be unlocked by us learning how to work with a factory, if that's, if that's a potential pathway. there have been, obviously DFMA is not, as we said, it's not a new topic, right? It's been around for decades, and there have been all sorts of attempts. The question is, do we have enough digital tools now that actually will enable us to explore these radical realities that can still produce interesting and unique and versatile, if you want, architecture, whilst we gain the efficiencies of what it means to be delivering within an industrial-based production system.
That makes sense. I remember back when I was in architecture, I was asking similar questions to the phrase that you just mentioned, is being able to bring, that knowledge upstream, from the manufacturing side. And a lot of folks would say, well, you're trying to put the cart in front of the horse. And my response to them was like, no, I'm trying to understand the size of the cart so I know what size horse I need, right? So there's kind of a correlation there, right? Because if your cart is too big and your horse is too small, doesn't matter if the cart's still behind the horse, it's still not going to work, right? So you need to have that knowledge kind of come upstream a bit.
Just one more thing, Charlie, to what you're saying. I think it's important for us, if you wish, designers, to start having a very kind of somber understanding of what's common versus what's different, like variable. Like this, where's the percentage of commonality versus variation? Where do we need to truly put our efforts to create meaningful variation as opposed to just reinventing the wheel? And to be honest, for now, it feels like we're reinventing the wheel so much time. We waste efforts rather than just, being able to change a few things that would truly make a difference to what we deliver.
I think the sheer example of schemas that are out there's easily half a dozen schemas, right? And I'll be honest, I was kind of driving one of those, which is still kind of out there, but the company no longer is. So there has to be some sort of common ground that we can kind of agree on at some point in time. We have another question that came through. This one's geared more towards the folks at Shapediver. Can each Grasshopper app be stored in some sort of kind of repo or database or something so that it can be accessed, on a company by company basis? So let's say, for example, the folks at Grimshaw are developing a series of, configurators for their design processes, right? Is this something that they can kind of host on your platform?
Yeah, so that's essentially, let's call it the phase 2 of what we're working on this year. So we want to at the same time bring this sort of organizational tools, so like to let teams really work together and in an enclosed space essentially, so potentially completely segregated from the rest of the platform, and at the same time provide these next level versioning tools where you can really call it a repo. At the moment you can't really call it a repo, but that's really where we'd like to go to. So that's something that we'd also be really happy to talk to people and see how they work typically, what's the workflow when working in a team on a set of parametric definitions, and see how it would be the most convenient to store and access those remote definitions, and to version them, of course.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a nice segue to the next question. Even though this one's geared towards Grimshaw, I think there's a parallel kind of side of it for the folks at Shapediver, and I'll kind of skim through it a bit. But essentially, can you guys discuss a little bit the relationship between the makers of these configurators and the users of the tools, right? For the Grimshaw folks, it's I'm guessing this is internal, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, in terms of the latter part that Georgios presented, it was internal and also collaboration with Bureau Happold, which we found very fruitful. But we have developed other configurators like the urban stuff in-house as well. And in terms of the relationship between, let's say, the maker and the user, I think in the latter part, for the internal only tools, we're rolling those out currently for feedback, and for the construction innovation hub work, the users have been instrumental as part of that. And maybe Georgios, the user mapping exercise that you undertook, if you want to talk on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess as I said, like one of the luxuries of being part of the Construction Innovation Hub is that you have, as Andy said, a cross-section of the UK construction industry. So basically, you have very representatives, a very good amount of representatives across all the key parts that would need to come in place for this to work. And I think, so as I said, one of the fundamental exercises with it was to actually take that user journey and talk to people and understand what are their needs, where they would see the efficiencies. And this is how we started, and like, we sort of had an intuition from the beginning, but like it became very concrete that there's no one good answer. There's such a vast variation of requirements. And this is very, this is very nicely coupled with what we're saying, that ultimately the configurators, they have to be developed by the different stakeholders, because this is the only way for them to be able to capture exactly the data they need, the process that they need, the outputs they need to be feeding.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the last point. I think you have this need for centralized intelligence about either a product. In our case, we've worked a lot with product design, of course, but also part of a project, right? And the idea is that that's also our idea, to have this generic algorithm that can be accessed in different environments, because then you give different fields of expertise the ability to interact with the same data, essentially. And so, yeah, I mean, if we talk about, I think the question was, some examples of who are the users and the creators of these kind of tools. Obviously, the tip of the iceberg of Shapediver is this like sort of client-facing tool. So you really can go all the way to like designers in a company create the full product and design to manufacture workflow, and have this as a client-facing tool that can, with easy like choice optioneering that even non-experts like everyday customers can do. But we also have these like more like internal tools, whether it's a team using for example, Ladybug, Karamba in the back to do some quick structural, analysis or daylight analysis to make sure, in the early design stages of a project, to make sure it, starts on the right track and doesn't go off the grid. And we also have, a big plus of like, remote solving, and the fact that, you don't have to exchange files, right? So the IP protection side of things, where if you want to provide like a, options to whether it's a client or partner, or even, more critical, a partner that's manufacturing, right? So you can work with external companies. Some of our clients works with external companies that manufacture, and in plants that are shared by a lot of different companies, right? So like you don't really want to send them a Grasshopper file, for example, and let them operate it from there. So you have, having these remote configurators that they can use to essentially, most of the parameters have been chosen by the rest of the team, and the ones that operate the machines are left to, the last parts before manufacturing. So that's also a use case we have. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your presentations. Thank you for the interactive Q&A session. This was amazing work.